Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those of you that are new here, hi, my name is Charlene and this is my cozy little YouTube channel where I talk mainly about books but also about travel and a little bit of lifestyle as well. And if you're coming back from another video, thank you so much for coming back, nice to see you. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my top 5 favourite books, an updated version. I did a top 5 favourite books video last year right at the start of my channel, and since then I've read lots more and taken reading much more seriously, and I happen to have come across some absolute bangers and some books I absolutely love that have kind of made their way into my top 5 and nudged a few of the other books out. So I thought I'd do an updated version of my top 5 favourite books today. If you've watched any of my other videos, you're probably going to come across books that I talk about quite regularly, because since I've read these books I've been kind of like blabbering on about them and talking about them at any chance that I have, but I thought I'd collate them into a list. And like, I'm very specific, you know, when people are like, oh, rate something out of 10, I take that so seriously and I'm like, so for me to arrange these into a top 5 and put them in like 5th, 4th, 3rd place, etc., took a lot of thinking, but I'm there. And yeah, I think I've got my definitive top 5 for now. Starting off strong in position number 5 is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. And I know if you've watched many of my videos or been kicking around with me for a while, then you know that I bang on about this book all the time. And I do, I absolutely love it, which is why it's made it into 5th place. So last year was the first time I'd ever read a Grady Hendrix book, and it was this book. This is my first Grady Hendrix read, and I just absolutely loved it. Like, it sounds stupid, but I didn't know that like that kind of genre of book existed. I don't know, that sounds really stupid, but as you're reading it, it literally feels like it could be a horror film that you're watching, and I absolutely love it. It was a really refreshing read. It wasn't too heavy, it was fun and exciting, and yeah, it was just like something that I hadn't really read before. To give you a very brief summary of the plot, I obviously don't want to give anything away in case you want to read it, but this book is set in America in the 90s, and it is basically like a very sleepy suburban town where not a fat lot happens, and all of the mums in the town are just, that's all they really feel like they are, is just mums. And so they've started a reading book club because they want a little bit more fun and excitement in their lives, and that's kind of their excuse to hang out with their friends. So they've got this book club and they really love reading true crime and horror books, which as soon as I read that I was like, check, because I love true crime and horror and things like that. So they've got their little book club and they're reading all of this these books, which they kind of have to hide from their friends and family and husbands and things like that because they don't want them to think they're weird. And then all of a sudden, kind of out of nowhere, a new person called James Harris, I think his name was James Harris, it's been a while since I've read this. Yeah, James Harris turns up in town and they're like, who is this new person? He has a kind of reason for being there and he's staying with one of their neighbours, and then they start to notice that weird things start happening in the town, especially the main character. She's like, there's something up with this guy. At first they try and be really friendly and polite to him. She even invites him along to the book club and he joins the book club. He's the only male member. But then, yeah, weird things start happening in town. Children start going missing. Old ladies start like developing horrible conditions and diseases and dying, and just really strange things keep happening, and all of them seem to tie back to one person. And through a lot of research and a process of elimination, the main character comes to find out that there's something not quite right about him. I don't want to give any more away than that, but I promise, like, it is such a good time. It's such a good read. If you like a horror film, if you like what I really enjoy as well in books and films and TV shows is like when something is self-aware, like when it knows that it might be like a bit tongue-in-cheek, or it might be a bit novelty, or it might be a bit like a kind of cult classic. I just love that, and I felt the same way about this book. I felt like it was really self-aware, it was fun, it was scary in places, it was shocking in places, and I just had such a good time reading it. So I'd highly recommend. This book is my number 5. And in 4th position is Billy Summers by Stephen King. Just like Grady Hendrix, last year was the first time that I'd ever read a Stephen King book, and I started off with Holly, but stupidly I didn't understand that Holly was like part of like a saga of books, so I was just like, I don't really get it. I still enjoyed it, but I didn't completely get it, or the character references and things like that. So I did a bit of research into Stephen King books that weren't like too horror, like too scary, because yeah, I didn't want something that was like absolutely terrifying to read before bed. So I came across Billy Summers, and I'm so glad that I did, because it was like something that I hadn't read before, and I absolutely loved reading it. So much so that this is a collector's edition that my husband very kindly bought for me because I loved it that much. You've probably heard me say this already about this book, but this was the first book that I've ever actually cried at, or that I can remember having cried at. And it's just such a great book. I know, like, obviously you're like, yeah, it's Stephen King, it's going to be good. But I didn't really know, because I hadn't read very much Stephen King. It is quite a chunker, it is quite a long book, and for a slow reader, that did take me some time to get through. I think it's like around 500-ish pages. But just to briefly go over the story. So Billy Summers obviously is the main character. His job, his like career, is that he's a professional hitman. So he gets hired for doing all of these like horrendous kill jobs. But he kind of like justifies it in his mind, because all of the people that he's doing these hits on are all horrendous people, and he kind of does a lot of research before he takes on a job, and just make sure that the person that he's killing, hitting, whatever it is, whatever the term is, that they deserve it. They've basically been a horrible person and they kind of deserve it in his mind. So he's kind of retired. He's got as much out of that as he can, and he's like comfortable with money and everything. But then there is a last job that comes his way. And right from the get-go, he's questioning doing it at all. He's like, I don't really need to do this. I'm kind of over it. I've got enough money. I'm set. But each time he's kind of thinking about it and talking to this person about the job, the money kind of keeps getting higher and higher. And it's like an obscene amount of money for one job. So he's like, I may as well do it. Just one last job and then I'm out. And as soon as he makes that decision to do it and kind of like okays it, he knows that that was the wrong decision. And from there, kind of everything that could go wrong goes wrong. So this is basically the story of before, during and after his last hit job, and how it doesn't go completely to plan, and how he's kind of been stitched up in a way. I don't want to give anything else away than that, but yeah, that's what the story is about in a kind of briefer overview. What I absolutely loved about this book was that there is the before, middle and after part of it. Usually if you had a book about like a hitman doing his last job, it would probably be all about the lead up and then finish with the event itself. But this book didn't do that. It went through the whole lead up, the whole process of like down to the minute detail of how he's going to make this happen and how he's going to carry out this job. And then afterwards as well, like what happens to the hitman after that? Where is he going? How is he coping? How is he going to try and avoid getting caught by the police? And there's so much more to it, because obviously in a way this has not been kind of a very straightforward or simple job. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye. He has to kind of unravel all of that as well, who's involved, all of these characters and all of this backstory to why he has come to be in this position. There is, as you'd expect with any Stephen King book, a whole lot of detail in this book, like, and I partly loved that and partly sometimes became a little bit overwhelmed by that, just because I am a slow reader and I was like, oh my god, there's like where am I at? Like there's so much detail, but I loved it. It was such a great book. I fell in love with the characters, particularly with Billy himself. Like I said, I cried at the ending. It was just, it went in a way that I didn't see it going, and I just really, when I was reading this book, you know, sometimes you get lost in the world of what you're reading, and that's exactly what happened here. And that's how I know I absolutely love a book, because when you start reading it, your brain kind of switches off from everything else. And yeah, I can't say enough about this book. And also, if you haven't read a Stephen King and you think like, oh, Stephen King's just all horror, I don't want to read a horror book, I don't want to read a scary book, then I'd really recommend this one, because it's not scary at all. It's just the story that I explained, and it is so incredibly in depth and interesting, and the characters are so well developed and so rich in detail. And I couldn't say anything more about it. I absolutely loved it. And yeah, Billy Summers is in my number 4 position. In my number 3 position, and some things never change in your top 5 no matter how much you read, and that is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Obviously, we all know and love the Harry Potter books, so I really don't need to give you a plot or an overview or anything like that. But this, it just, you know, I read a lot, and there are always those few books that just for your whole life you will just keep coming back to, and this is one of those books for me. This is like a little comfort blanket when I don't know what to read, or if I'm feeling like a bit stressed and I just want like some familiarity and comfort. I'll read one of the Harry Potter books, but this one is my absolute favourite. I've got this lovely set of them. This is the Gryffindor set because that's my house. My husband hates that. He hates when people talk about their Harry Potter house because he's like, it's not a thing, it's not real. But I'm Gryffindor. And so I have like this lovely box set of Gryffindor books, and this is obviously from that set. And it's just absolutely lovely. I love this book. It's happiness, it's comfort, it's childhood. It's good memories. Me and my husband are very fortunate enough. We've been to Florida a few times, and so we've been to like the Wizarding World in Universal Studios in Orlando, and as well as that I've been to the Warner Brothers studio tour in London like 3 times, and I absolutely love it. I just love the world of Harry Potter. It's just so complete and so like all encompassing, and when you're in it, you know exactly where you are, like you can picture it exactly in your head, and I just love it. It's like a great big comfort blanket, and I love it so much. So my number 3 position is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. In my number 2 position, we're getting close, is Misery by Stephen King, and you've probably seen me hold up many different versions of this book, and that's because me and my husband have quite a few versions of Misery between us. It's one of our favourite books. And yeah, so Misery, again, last year was the first time I'd ever read Stephen King. First I read Holly, then I read Billy Summers, and then Misery. So Misery was my 3rd Stephen King book I'd ever read, and I just loved it so much. When I first read it, after reading it, I scored it a 4 out of 5. And then afterwards I was like, I couldn't get it out of my head. And like I had envisioned it so clearly and so perfectly. And I realised that the reason that I scored it a 4 out of 5 instead of a 5 out of 5 was because of how like trapped and uncomfortable it made me feel in parts. But then I realised that that's exactly what you're meant to feel. That's exactly how you're supposed to feel, and how Stephen King wants to make you feel. So I was like, the fact that I felt like that, and the fact that I've still got this story in my head, and I think about it all the time. I think it is such a perfectly written story. Yeah, so I had to put this in my top 5, and now like I love it so much, it's kind of grown on me more and more and more that it's made it to my number 2 position. And I just absolutely love it. I know this is an incredibly famous book, and a lot of you would have heard about the story and would have read it yourselves, or have even watched the film. But if you don't know, I'm going to give you a very generic, spoiler-free overview of the plot. So that is, the main character is a writer, and I love that, by the way. I love that Stephen King writes about writers all the time. I think it's just so perfect. So yeah, the main character is a writer, and he's got a series of books. He's got lots and lots of different books, but one of his series of books is called Misery, and he doesn't particularly love it that much, but it's one of his best sellers. But he just wants to wrap up that series and just be done with it, because he's kind of over the characters. He doesn't even really like the story or the characters that he's created. And so he wants to kind of like move on to new things and put that part of his life behind him. But unfortunately, his fan base love it so much. But anyway, he's just gone and written what he thinks is the best book of his life. Nothing to do with the Misery series, just something brand new that he really wants to write about, and something that he finishes it and he's like, that's it. That's the book of my life. I've done it. And on the way back from writing that book, he gets into a car accident and gets taken into the care of a woman called Annie Wilkes. I know it sounds like I'm giving you a lot of information, but that's nothing that you couldn't find out from the trailer or from the blurb inside the book. So yeah, he's in the care of a woman called Annie Wilkes, and he wakes up very confused, doesn't know how he's got there, what's happened. He's just in a lot of pain. Then he comes to realise that Annie Wilkes is a fan of his, and not just any fan, she is his number one fan. And her favourite thing in the entire world is Misery. So the story then follows what happens when he's in Annie's care, and he's in there for quite a long time. He's trying to heal and deal with the situation that he's in, and I'm not going to give anything more away than that, but I absolutely love the characters, especially Annie. I think the character is so well developed, so well written, like a character I've never met in a book before. But she is so well rounded that I feel like I know every part of her and every part of her brain, how she thinks, how she works. I think it's absolutely perfect. I just absolutely love it so much. The story, there's a story kind of within the story about him writing as well, and I really like that. I think that those two things blend in together absolutely perfectly and seamlessly. And yeah, I just absolutely loved reading this book, and it will definitely be one that I revisit, and that's why it's made it to my number 2 position. So yes, in my number 2 spot is Misery by Stephen King. And finally, my number 1 spot is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And I love this book so much. I haven't even read it that long ago, but it shot right up into my number 1 position. As you can see, I've got here a 30th anniversary edition, which I just think is so extremely beautiful. And I love to have limited edition versions of books that I love. And I just think, yeah, it's absolutely beautiful copy of the book. But yeah, this is my first ever dark academia book that I've ever read. And as soon as I read it, I was just completely in love with the genre. And apparently this is the first book that's kind of classified as dark academia. So it's like Donna Tartt kind of invented that category all by herself. And she did such a perfect job. This is a very long book. It's like 600 plus pages, so it took me quite a while to read, but I really didn't mind, because when I was in this world, I just wanted to stay there and I just wanted to be there, and I absolutely loved it. Like, it lives in my head. I think about it all the time. Like, I just want to base my entire life around this book. So basically, an overview of the plot is that there is a college age boy called Richard Papin. I don't know if it's Papin, anyway, Richard. And he has come from California, and it's time for him to go to university, and he's trying to decide which university he wants to go to. It's kind of not as simple as that, because he's in a bit of a low income household, and so he kind of has to apply for grants and do his very best to take it upon himself, basically, to get to where he wants to be, because his parents just have absolutely no interest whatsoever. Eventually, he comes across this university. I can't remember where it is now. I think it's Vermont, something like that. Anyway, why can't I remember that? Anyway, I'll have a check and put it at the bottom of the screen if I'm wrong. But he goes to this college. He gets in on a scholarship, like on a grant thing. And when he's there, he doesn't even really know what he wants to do. He studied Greek in the past, so he's thinking about it, but also there's a few other things that he'd like to try his hand at, and he's kind of been bouncing around from subject to subject. But when he gets to this school, he's like, firstly, absolutely amazed by it. And the way that the school is described in this book reminds me very much of Saltburn, like that kind of amazing medieval kind of historic school. That's what I picture in my head. And when he's there, he's kind of like putting out his feelers, getting like a feel for the campus and for the people there and for the teachers and things like that. And he comes across this very mysterious group of students, and he's like, who are they? Like immediately he wants to know more about them and who they are. And all of these different characters in this particular group that he's like kind of obsessing over, they turned out to be classes of a very, very small class of Greek students, and their teacher is Julian, and he's extremely picky about what student he lets into his class, into his group. And he's like, this is all a bit mysterious and a bit weird, but I'm intrigued and I want to know more. And because he's learned Greek in the past, he kind of has an in. So he puts himself in positions where he can get to know the people and he can get to know the teacher, and eventually he gets himself into this class. He very quickly comes to realize that the students in this group are not at all who he thought they'd be. There's a lot of secrets, there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of darkness about them, and he just wants to know more. So basically he gets in with these group of people. They're very, very, very much into Greek like language, but also theology, and they kind of live their entire lives by it. And I don't know how much more I can say without giving it away, but some very dark things happen. They do some very dark things as a group. Actually, I can say, because it says it right at the beginning of the story as well, is that one of them die, and it kind of starts there, and then it backtracks into the whole story of how the lead up to that happened and what happened afterwards. And I just love this book so much. Like the detail that I've heard a lot of people say that they don't like the characters in this book, and I understand that because they're not nice people. They're horrible, mysterious, dark, secretive, weird people. But I love the characters for how well they're written. Donna Tartt is an extraordinary writer. Each of the characters is so well explained that I feel like I know every single one of them like they're someone I know in real life. It's just the whole story is, for me, it was a little bit of a slow burn, but I don't mind that at all because I was completely happy in this world. I was living in it. So yeah, it's a little bit of a slow burn, but some very interesting things happen. In places, it's a real page turner. And I just loved the theme, like the tone, the darkness, the overall mood. I just loved it so, so much. Is there anything I'm missing out on in this book? No, I don't think so. But yeah, if you haven't read it, like Donna Tartt, like I've just said, is an extraordinary writer. When I first started reading this book, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to read all of this because the writing is so intelligent, and because she's dealing with a lot of like Greek language and Greek theology and all of these like stories I've never heard of, I was a bit in places like, oh, I can't follow. I don't know if I'm going to like this or not. But if you're reading it and you feel that way, please press on and carry on through it because those points are really like kind of, yeah, they're important to the story. But if you kind of don't get the reference or don't understand what she's saying, it doesn't matter because the story develops otherwise. It's so interesting. It's so deep, it's so dark. I love dark academia. I just love this book so much and I bang on about it all the time. I love the characters. I really want it to be a film, like very badly, but I also would hate it if it was done wrong and not exactly like what I've got in my head, but I'd love it if it was a film. And yeah, everybody talks about this book and how much of an amazing writer Donna Tartt is, and like I couldn't bang on about it anymore. She's such a great writer. But I'm going to stop blabbering on about this book and just tell you that it's my #1 spot, and I hope you can see why. And if you've read it, please let me know, spoiler free, what you thought. But in my #1 spot is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Okay, so that was my top 5 books as of February 2025. May well change at some point, who knows? Like, as I'm reading more and more books and I'm starting to fall in love with reading more and more, I'm coming across lots of books which I'm like, oh my God, like I absolutely love that. So who knows if in a while my top 5 might change, but for now that's where I'm at. If you've read any of those books, please let me know in the comments, spoiler free, what you thought. If there's anything based on those books that you think that I would like, please do let me know. I've been absolutely loving talking to all of you in the comments. Like, I'm getting, like, slowly I'm getting a few more comments, and I just absolutely love it, because I don't have that many people in my kind of normal life that love reading or love books as much as I do. And yeah, it's just nice to talk to people about it and to get your recommendations and to build like the relationships. I absolutely love it. If you've watched all this video, thank you so much. I would love you forever if you would like this video and subscribe to my little channel. Like I said, get in touch with me. I love chatting to you, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Speak soon.